Welcome back to Crooked Lantern. Today we're going to be taking a look at an Optimus 8R made in Sweden stove. These are a pretty common design backpacking stove. There's several different brands. Primus, I believe, one makes one almost identical to this. They're all essentially the same. They all operate mostly the same. So we're going to take a look, get it lit up, and kind of go over a few things. So first thing you do, just gently pull that tab up, swing open the lid. When you open it up, you're going to see a wrench and potentially another tool if you're lucky. This one is missing the other tool that's supposed to be there. But this wrench will allow you to remove the generator tip where the fuel comes out and remove the knob right here. So you can start sliding it out a little bit. Remove your knob. One side says close, the other side says clean. Slide your tank out the rest of the way, and you kind of have your whole assembly there. It's a really simple design. Take this, you're going to put it through the side hole onto the brass fitting internally. That's kind of squared up for where it would fit properly. So these are interesting as they don't necessarily have an offsetting. They have one side that is clean, and the other side that is open. That's interesting because when you have it set to close, well, my mistake. It is set to close and it is set to clean. So when you have it set to close, you're all the way closed, but there's no open setting, and when you're on the clean setting, it's not technically open either. So it's kind of somewhere in between, and you have to find that sweet spot, and that's what we'll get into a little bit later. So first thing you can do is remove your flame spreader initially, just to take a look at things in here. What you'll have is your orifice, an area where the fuel would come out. You want to make sure it's relatively clean. There's not a bunch of soot on there. One way you can clean it, if it is really dirty, is you just simply unscrew this flame spreader bell housing holder guy, and take that, set it to the side, and you can take some steel wool and clean that. And see, as I didn't have this closed all the way, a little bit of fuel did come through there. So we know that this one is clean. If it's not clean, what you'll need to do is you'll need to use the clean setting on this knob, and I'll show you how to do that after I wipe off this fuel. So what you'll do is you'll place that on there, and you'll turn it all the way to clean. And I don't know if it'll come through very well, but there's a small tip coming through the top of that orifice. That's allowing that passage to be cleaned completely through. I'm going to turn it all the way back to close. So we know that this area is clean and fuel can pass through. If it's not passing through after you clean it, check your tank to make sure there's fuel in it. So you're going to screw that back on, turning it clockwise. I know I have fuel coming through, so I'm going to go ahead and place my flame spreader back on there. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my hands on this tank and I'm going to kind of warm it up. What that does is puts a little bit of warmth into the tank, and it pushes that fuel away. It kind of adds, I don't know, pressure at a very, very small amount, just enough to push it through that orifice. Also, this tank has a cap on it that will allow you to attach a pump, so you can actually pressurize these tanks. But these tanks take a very, very, very small amount of pressure. So if you do happen to have that adapter, which I do not put a lot of pressure into this tank, as you will crack it. These, have a very simple braze weld right there, and you will crack them if you put too much pressure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this so it's at the full closed position. I'm going to turn it about a quarter turn. And looking at it at an angle, I can see fuel coming out of that orifice. I'm going to watch for it to fill this small basin at the bottom of it. And there's a small brass basin. I can see the fuel starting to trickle down into that area. Continue to warm this until you see it spread out. We've got a nice little pool of fuel down there. I'm going to go ahead and light it at this point. If your workbench light's on fire, then you know you've been dealing with fuel. So I went ahead and closed it. For some reason my workbench is lighting on fire. So we're starting to get some fuel to spray through. It's getting nice and hot. Once it heats up, try not to lose all your arm hair. Once it gets to a certain temperature, you're going to kind of start to hear it calm down. You're going to see it turn to a blue flame. So it's not going to be a wild yellow flame any longer. It's going to be a controlled burning flame coming out of that orifice. And what you can do is turn it until you just start to hear it die off, and then turn it back a tad. So what'll happen is you have your closed all the way clockwise, and you're clean all the way counterclockwise. So when you kind of start to get that tip to come through, you'll hear it die down, and then go back up. Die down, and then you just kind of play with it to see where you get your nicest burning. It's dying down. So let me go back. I must have spilled a little bit of fuel on my workbench earlier when I was putting fuel in this, and apparently the wood holds the flames a little bit, or the fuel, just enough to burn. So I lost a little arm hair on that one. So now you've got a nice burning flame. You can put a pot or a percolator, something in there. So you can see it's burning pretty steady. So, to turn it off, we're going to take this, turn it all the way to close, nice and tight. Not too tight to where you're going to strip it off, but definitely make it tight. One of the things with these stoves is because it's so easy for them to be bumped into an open position, and if you leave fuel in here, you could have it in your car driving somewhere and fuel starts leaking out of it. So you definitely want to make sure that is closed all the way nice and tight. And then you want to watch that orifice and make sure that there's no longer fuel coming out of it. Because when these get hot, this area, there's a lot of pressure and it wants to push that fuel out and wants to push it somewhere. So make sure that's closed nice and tight, and you can check this fount and make sure there's no pressure in there. Mine actually had a little bit, and a little bit of fuel came out. So just by the nature of everything, this whole area gets warm. And this gets really hot, this gets warm. The warmth here continues to push that fuel out. So you want to kind of let this cool down, double check in a little bit, make sure there's no pressure in this tank, and just make sure that's closed nice and tight. So that's really all there is to it. They're very simple, and I suppose that's why they were considered backpacking stoves. It was something you could pack in there and pack out easily and light it up pretty easily, and you didn't need a ton of fuel to keep that full. Nice little small flame, and you can definitely make some coffee with this. So hopefully this was helpful. If you have any questions, drop a comment below, like, subscribe, and I'll keep the videos coming. Thanks.